So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital
Today, we need to
revolution.
talk about the Minimum Service Levels Act. It's a really important act that does ban the right to strike in public sector unions in the United Kingdom. So the legislation was published in early January of this year and then voted on and then ultimately passed the House of Lords on July 20th of 2023. And what it does is it requires a minimum amount of employees to be working in border security, fire and rescue, education services, and health in the event of a strike. So effectively, the once a strike notice is issued, the employer will give at least 7 days before the strike a work notice of who it needs to work during the strike. And so ultimately, what this could result in is a significant amount of people working when they're supposed to be on strike, making the strike less effective, right? As a result, the strike, they can't really strike for more wages because you won't be seeing any cut in services. If the trade union does not make sure that employees are making the minimum service levels, then the strike is not protected, and as a result, they might lose their, or they would lose their automatic protection from unfair dismissal. As a result, they would also maybe have legal action taken against them or lose the protection that they have for legal action to be taken against them. And so they could be subject to an injunction to prevent the strike from taking place if they're not following the work notices and the minimum service levels. And so, ultimately, the work notice is really what is going to define it here. Labor leaders are absolutely incensed over this. They said that the reality of the legislation is now becoming clear. In key sectors, employers will be able to issue work notices compelling a majority of employees to work even after Democratic vote for strike action. That's effectively trying to outlaw strikes. It's the biggest attack on workers' rights in post-war Britain and reminiscent of the oppressive restrictions that exist in dictatorships and authoritarian regimes. Now, that was from Matt Rack. He's the general secretary of the Fire Brigades Union, and as a result, heavily affected by this, of course. And they participated in a summit by the Trade Union Congress that they're looking at trying to figure out how they can fight against this law and how they can handle it. The Trade Union Congress appears to be similar to the AFL-CIO in the United States. It's a broad spectrum of workers across various industries and sectors, and a federation of trade unions that includes public sector, private sector, service, trade and construction, transportation workers, education professionals, etc. So they take care of a wide array of different workers here. So to return to what's interesting about this, most European countries actually have a prohibition on some public sector workers from striking altogether. Portugal and Greece specifically have explicit frameworks on how to do it. Germany and the Netherlands actually don't have minimum service level laws, but there have been court rulings in the past that have allowed for restrictions in the practice. In addition, there's Poland, who has an extensive list of professions that are prohibited from striking altogether. When we think of authoritarian regimes, as the Fire Brigade Union General Secretary described them, we don't typically think of Portugal or Greece too much, or the Netherlands, of course. And so this is actually a fairly common practice throughout Europe in what I would consider workers with pretty good working rights. In the United States, there's a Federal Service Labor Management Relations statute. In it, the federal employees have the right to engage in collective bargaining, but there are limitations still. It ultimately prohibits federal employees from participating in strikes, and it states that federal employees are not allowed to engage in strikes, work stoppages, or slowdowns. In the United States, or in the United States, it's really the states that also play a role here, right? These aren't all federal issues. Some states permit certain government employees, such as teachers, to strike under specific conditions. For example, states like New York and California may allow strikes by public employees, but there are often legal requirements and procedures that must be followed, including mandatory mediation and fact-finding procedures. This, of course, reminds me of Reagan's response to the PATCO strike. That was the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization. In 1981, they went on strike, 11,000 air traffic controllers. They were looking for better working conditions, higher wages, and a reduced work week. He took a strong assertion against that. On August 3rd, 1981, just 2 days after the strike, Reagan addressed the striking air traffic controllers and told them to return to work within 48 hours. When they didn't, he fired over 11,000 controllers. It led to the PATCO decertification by the Federal Labor Relations Authority, and the union was effectively disbanded. And so this is very analogous to this discussion surrounding minimum service levels for federal employees in the United Kingdom. Scotland has decided that they are not going to enforce this legislation, and the trade union Congress really hasn't come out as strongly against this as you'd think they have. I mean, they had an emergency protest of about 600 people shortly after it, and they have 5.5 million. They're not looking for, or they don't appear to look for a mass movement. They're looking for civil rights groups to get involved, trying to get the Scottish National Party and the Liberal Democrats to amend the legislation. But a bill as serious as this has not really seemed to reach a huge audience, which is one of the reasons I'm talking about it today. If you're interested in things like this, of course, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps a small channel out. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.